Right, so we're going to move on from that to something that's a bit of a hangover from our Zombies episode from a couple of years ago, which is, well, yes, a zombie film, but a zombie film that's from Jim Jarmusch, who we last enjoyed in Patterson. The wonderful film about the poet who wrote about matchbooks. Oh dear. Scott, the dead don't die.
Yes, what do we let ourselves in for? The Dead Don't Die, which is, you mentioned, Jim Jarmusch's 2019 zombie flick. It's maybe not the obvious choice for revisiting, particularly given I'm not a massive fan of either horror films or Jim Jarmusch films, but it did present such a contrast from last month's execrable Army of the Dead that it seemed like it would make for some interesting comparisons, and I suppose it does in a way. In a tried and trusted zombie film style, a small American town is beset by a plague of dead rising from their graves and causing their unique brand of shambolic mayhem, while the quirky bunch of locals try to survive. Well, broadly speaking, anyway. The police force are, of course, the first responders to this unpleasantness, headed by Bill Murray's Chief Cliff Robertson and Adam Driver's Officer Ronnie Peterson, the latter of whom knows that this will end badly, because he's read the script and is already tired of Sturgill Simpson's title music. Yes, it's one of those films. More characters in the ensemble are introduced, like Steve Buscemi's irascible racist Frank Miller, a farmer, and Danny Glover's Hank Thompson, a hardware store owner who is most certainly too old for the and also Tilda Swinton's Zelda Winston, the town's new undertaker, played as if she was David Bowie's The Man Who Fell to Earth by the Way of the Isle of Lewis, for good reason, as it turns out. There's many other well-kent faces, of course, like Selena Gomez's Zoe, who's part of a stereotypically young adult out-of-towners whose days are obviously numbered, and there's also Iggy Pop as a coffee zombie, and if I recall correctly, RZA as a delivery driver, and with all credit to whoever wrote the Wikipedia entry for this film, Tom Waits as a baroquely bearded eccentric hermit. Right, now, this is the sort of film where any sort of detailed plot recap would be completely redundant, so let's just say that it's an exceedingly low-key take on the genre, at least in terms of the reactions of most of the cast to the events, the incongruity of which is where the film derives most of its humour. The critical question is, of course, is it funny? And my answer is, kinda? Which itself is quite a trick, as its early doors fourth wall demolition made me want to buy a physical copy of this just to destroy it. But in hindsight, it popping up as an occasional running gag does kind of work for me, particularly by the end, at which point the silliness of it has been cranked up from underlying to overwhelming. Now, its humour is more situational than set up at some punchlines, and will 100% not be to everyone's taste. In fact, I'm pretty sure that everyone that watches this film will find it hit and miss, and the relative percentages of both will naturally determine your overall enjoyment of the film. And it's very hard for me to guide you, dear audience, if it's going to land for you. But let's just say if you cannot stand the sort of torture comedy of Austin Powers' extended urination scene, then there's at least one chunk of this that will drive you up the wall. Now, I've not seen the obvious comparison point, Jarmusch's Only Lovers Left Alive, his vampire flick, but I can at least say this shares a similar sense of urgency as danger as the other Jarmusch driver vehicle, Patterson, which is an outlandish thing to say. I've also seen this as described as respecting the genre. I'm not so sure on that. While the practical zombie body-chomping effects are a homage to Tom Savini, there's one jab, or what I perceive this one at any rate, about the exceedingly superficial critique of consumerism that's attributed to the Dawn of the Dead, and yes, I will die on this hill and then come back as a zombie and eat you. So, where does that leave The Dead Don't Die? For a film that appears on a quick bounce around review sites to be a film that you either love or hate, I'm broadly indifferent about it. Overall, I suppose I enjoyed it enough not to regret spending a couple of hours with it, and if you have a greater affinity for Jarmusch's quirky indie sensibilities, then you'll probably enjoy this, but that's certainly not a broad recommendation. If it sounds up your street, watch it. If it doesn't, don't. I'm not the boss of you. Live your life. Be free.
I, however, am the boss of you and command you to... No, I'm probably fairly close to the indifferent thing. I didn't dislike it. I was too puzzled by most of it to have that sort of a feeling.
Yes, this is generally my response to I think every Jim Jarmusch film I've seen is, I'm puzzled by this. I don't understand it. I don't hate it, but I'm just not sure what the point is.
Despite the addition of Bill Murray, I was going to say it's not as good as Patterson, but Patterson's not good, but it's not as Patterson.
Yes, it's intriguing in a sort of way somehow.
Yeah, I was a bit worried at the start when Adam Driver turns to Bill Murray and says, when he says, "Why is this funny?" He goes, "It's a theme tune."
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought, okay. And what was weird though is like it could have been really annoying, but then it's used so infrequently. I kind of like, well, why did they bother?
Yes.
Like it happens twice in the whole film.
It's one of the many things that makes me go, why? Like, why is there an actual alien in this? I don't understand.
Yeah. And why was she Scottish?
Yes, all good questions.
And I mean, I've seen Tilda Swinton do Scottish accents before. I think she's Scottish in Young Adam, isn't she? But she's not the worst at it, so I mean, it wasn't offensive, unlike that thing in Fast and Furious 9. But, it was a couple of bum notes, but that was okay. It was more just like, but why? Although, yeah, my response to a lot of the film was, but why? I mean, maybe it's because, Scott, this film was written by a wild animal, or perhaps several wild animals.
Yes.
So there were a couple of running gags that amused me. It's, I don't know, it's so strange. People are just pulling all sorts of stuff out of this film that's quite clearly not in there. And like the point you mentioned too about that's definitely a dig at the idea that Dawn of the Dead's about anything beyond the bit that this film actually says, which is what we both feel like. It's like they're just doing stuff that they're used to do. It's kind of memory. It's not a comment on consumerism.
Yeah,
that's a pretty heavy dig in this. But at the same time, I don't know whether he's deliberately inviting people doing the same thing to his film, but people have done it, and it's just not in there.
Yeah,
I saw one like pull quote from somewhere that was saying that this is one of the angriest films I've seen all year, and it's because it's full of this really strong environmental message. And I'm like, really? I'm watching the environmental like subplots going on this and thinking I could pretty much just as easily see that, possibly even more easily, as like him thinking that global warming's nonsense. That he's making fun of that rather than making a point. There's just, it's not in there.
Yes.
So that could be either way, because I don't think he's saying anything. But again, now what I'm wondering is, see, let me try to goad people. Because some people really have glommed onto this, and because there's the idea that the planet's slowing down because of polar fracking.
Yeah.
And that's what's making zombies. But it's like, it could just be sort of like the nonsense science you get in films like this, which is kind of what I'd settled on for the most part. So like, whether it's a comet going over, or it's a virus or something like that, or it's like in this case the planet's slowing down because of stuff, but people have really gone this out. It's a furious film, it's really angry at the strong environmental. I don't think that's in there. I really don't. But yeah, it's weird. Special effects aren't great. I assumed that they spent all of the money on Adam Driver.
Yeah.
So they didn't have any money left for the zombie special effects.
It's difficult to render Adam Driver. He's got a lot of triangles that you need to shade and such like that. I'm not a scientist. I don't know how it works, but I think that is how it works, right?
Well, I assume they really had run out of money for rendering Adam Driver, because when they rendered him in a car, they had to do a smaller car.
Yes.
Which is less triangles, less polygons, because he looked like he was in a silly wee toy. But that was quite amusing. I mean, and the thing is, like, some of it sort of invites, like, there's some sort of comedy stuff, because like they very, very clearly show you that the town only has 768 people. You see that sign, the population sign, several times, yet it's got a police force and a motel and a funeral home and a young offenders institute in a town that's big enough to support a shop. A village that's big enough to support a shop.
Yeah.
So like, is that a kind of like making fun of where things like this are sometimes set, or is he saying something else? I'm like, I mean, I don't know enough about Jim Jarmusch, but my gut reaction is that he's kind of taking the piss with everything. There's stuff again, it doesn't really go anywhere. Like the Steve Buscemi character, who they peg quite early has just been a bit of a git. But then you see him in the restaurant wearing that Keep America White Again hat.
Yes.
But then he says, this coffee's too damn black for me, because he doesn't enjoy his coffee. And then he looks at Danny Glover, who's sitting right next to him, and goes, oh, I just mean it's too strong for me. So you don't want to suggest to him that you're actually being racist, but you're wearing that hat. It's like, is he saying anything? The filmmaker, I mean, or what? But then that goes nowhere anyway. It's irrelevant.
Yeah. there's a lot of irrelevance to this. Like even the I don't think you've mentioned them in recap, but the kids that break out of that juvenile hall doesn't go anywhere. I don't know how much of this actually was scripted and how much of this was just let's get some people on and try and fill something up. I believe it was scripted because I seem to remember that I was reading that it was Bill Murray and Tilda Swinton kind of signed on to this, and there was a script attached to it at some point. So yes, maybe I did actually see the script, but it has the feeling of something that was kind of improvised. A lot of it, that kind of real hit and miss and sort of general arcs not really tying up and it just sort of meandering along and then stopping rather than having any kind of real ending. Yeah, I'm going to at some point need to go and just watch all of Jarmusch's films because I'm interested in them. I'm not sure I actually like any of them, but I find them very interesting. So we'll probably do it at some point. But I can't in all good conscience recommend this to anyone that is not already knowing that they're going to go into like it. You know what I mean? It's the kind of film that you probably already know if you're going to like. Definitely not for a general audience at all, though.
No, again, I didn't dislike it, but I was mostly baffled.
Yes.
I definitely enjoy it, but I didn't dislike it. I've only seen a couple of other Jim Jarmusch films that I've seen Coffee and Cigarettes, but that was so long ago. Again, it's one of the songs amazing. I've not seen it so long ago that I can't bring to mind much about it. And Broken Flowers, and most of what I remember is Bill Murray and some flowers, which is not really a particularly great memory of it. So I maybe revisit some Jim Jarmusch stuff. It's kind of interestingly weird enough that I think I'd want to.
Yeah.
But it feels even like in the editing and stuff that they might have kind of been improvising because like at one point there's a sparkle around Selena Gomez, but that's the only time anything like that's seen in the whole film.
Yeah.
Like a wee kind of digital golden sparkle around her, right?
Yeah.
I felt like maybe it would be the sort of thing that might be a reference to Pulp Fiction or something, because there's that one moment in Pulp Fiction when Uma Thurman says, don't be a square, and then the thing appears on the screen, and it always stood out for me. I never was quite happy about what that was meant to mean.
Yeah.
So it's like just to give away the artifice, or did you think it was funny, or just I'll stick that in here, why not? Or maybe it was like, well, everything else in here is basically so people can get out of it whatever the hell they want because everything's in there if you're looking for it, even though like that thing that means that none of it's in there.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting and weird. I certainly wouldn't put it in with other zombie films.
No.
Or other films, really. It is a thing of its own.
Yes. It belongs to the genre of Jim Jarmusch films, which seems to be the only thing it can possibly relate to. When its closest relative that I've seen is a film about a poetry writing bus driver where no drama happens, and it's essentially the same vibe as this film that's a zombie film. Yeah, it's probably not really a zombie film, so yeah.